It is really amazing how much you get out of practice doing this when you haven't done it in a while. I mean, I've been fuffing with this thing now for like 10 minutes, setting it up and getting going to make a second video because you were all so nice and welcomed me back. And so I thought, should really do another one. And I had all intention of doing one last week, but I got a chest infection and you can probably still hear it. I have this husky voice. I could do this, this influencer thing that they do there where they tap on things. I could do like, anyway, I won't. I won't go there. Yeah, so it's just like I was just poorly. It's really hard to do videos when you're coughing. It's also really hard to read when you're coughing. And I discovered that again. I know that. And it's also really hard to listen to audiobooks because you're coughing over things and then you have to go back. And so not much reading happened. But obviously I've read, like I've been better and, I've read around. But it's weird because I'm not quite sure on where to start with what I've read recently. Because recently, you could say, is the last, when's the last time I did a proper booktube video? Probably 5 years ago, even longer than that. It was during COVID, so maybe 6 years ago. So yeah, it's been a while, and so I'm not gonna sit here and talk about all the books I read since. We would be here a while, but I thought I'd just pick 4, and 2 of them are actually cheating. But it's because I'll talk about it, and but I also want to talk about other things. So this is not a, are they still called wrap-ups? So this is not really a wrap-up video. It's more like a what I've been up to video, and reading happens to be part of that. So yeah, apart from sickness, which also led to me ending up in A&E, and I had the pleasure of attending, and pleasure is very much in quotation marks. The quotation marks are in bold, at the new Midlands Metropolitan Hospital, University Hospital, MMUH, A&E. And it's a very new hospital. It took, it was delayed by something like 10 years or something. And I'm probably exaggerating, but it was very delayed because construction people go bankrupt and all sorts of things happened. And it is one of those things where I think it's like, wow, so you built this new hospital, and at least A&E is not really improved. In fact, I mean, who designed that place? Who designed that place? Who designed that A&E? I don't know. Having said that, everyone, apart from one registrar, was lovely. And I ended up in the day assessment unit, which, is obviously much nicer than sitting in A&E. Everyone was lovely. A special shout out to Bernard, the nurse practitioner who did the assessment and was sort of like my guide through the day. He was just an absolute star. I can't fault that. I mean, honest to God, credit to the medical profession that man was. He was so good. And and I'm all better now. I don't know. It's like I'm getting distracted by myself. I have only just taken my ADHD medication, so it is always quite funny. I'm not sure if it will happen during this video, but sometimes my husband can tell when it kicks in, so you might be able to tell when it kicks in. Anyway, apart from being sick, what I do a lot when I'm sick is I tend to watch quite a bit of television, because unlike reading, with television you have both like the visuals and the audio, and obviously also subtitles. So even if you have a coughing fit, I can usually keep up. And so I watched quite a few things, and I'm not going to mention everything, but a few things that I watched I want to talk about. And one is a K-drama called Can This Love Be Translated? If you're a K-drama watcher, you will know about this. This is kind of the drama of the moment. And I really quite liked it. Obviously, I'm a translator, so anything to do with translation, although he's obviously an interpreter, not a translator as such, you know, so not the same, when we don't do the same thing. I could not do interpreting, yeah. I have huge respect for people who can. It's very difficult. It's a completely different world. What I always find quite funny is that, you know, and I'm not saying that there aren't people like that around, is like, but it's this kind of portrayal of people who are translators and speak several languages that, you know, you can just do it in all directions, and all those languages you speak you can also interpret in, and in both ways. For most translators, interpreters, that's not really true. Most of us translate in one direction, or even if we do several languages, it's usually into one direction. So we go from, you know, like one language into another language. So I know people, for example, who are both French and Italian translator, for example. I know someone, but she only translates into English. She doesn't translate English into French and into Italian. But, you know, it's fiction, right? So it doesn't have to be accurate. It's not necessary. What I found quite interesting was that I expected it to be just like a typical romantic comedy, but it did go to quite some dark places of trauma and dealing with trauma, and you know, and communicating with each other, and with some nice undertones. It's still obviously a very light K-drama, but I did quite enjoy it. Found it very watchable. But, you know, even though there were some like lengthy bits and some unnecessary misunderstandings, that is just part and parcel of the kind of thing, but it's sometimes a little bit annoying. I also watched Obituary, which is an Irish drama on Netflix, and I had watched Botkin before a few years ago. I loved it. I love Botkin. Same kind of team, I think. I think it's the same production company, but certainly the main actress and certainly a lot of the actors in Botkin are also in Obituary. And the story is very simple. Young woman, she writes for the local paper, the obituaries. Her boss puts her onto a freelance salary, so she now only gets paid per obituary. But obviously people aren't dying quick enough. So what can you do? You know, you have to help things along a little. It's very dark, but very funny. I really enjoyed it. I've seen they're making a second series of it. And yeah, I can't wait. I love the actress. I keep forgetting her name, but she is just phenomenal. Absolutely adore her. And I also watched the new Christie adaptation on Netflix, Seven Dials. Not a fan. It's sort of... It wants to be too many things at the same time, and he really isn't any of it. It's very glossy, good looking, but it sort of misses for me that inherent eccentricity of Christie, and the kind of everything, you know, like the threat feels so manufactured, whereas like I think I've seen adaptation of that before, where it really, even though you know the story, it has you on the edge of the seat. So yeah, I think just by casting Helena Bonham Carter, you don't make it like eccentric. You know, she's an eccentric person, but just because she's in the thing doesn't make it eccentric or gives it an edge, you know. I mean, she was great. She was probably the best thing about it, to be fair. Yeah, so it was okay, watchable. You know, when you're ill, totally watchable. You know, have some snacks, have a cup of tea, absolutely fine for that. But it's not one of the greats. Then I also that triggered sort of me and my husband talking about all the different Marples and all the different Christie adaptations in general, and we ended up watching last night, in fact, Joan Hickson's Marple, murder at the Vicarage. And it is so interesting. It is so old, but God, those Marples, they were good. And because they capture that weirdness and that creepiness, and also the absolute passive aggressiveness of English people in their conduct. They're so polite, but God, it's passive aggressive. The way Marple talks to Inspector Slag and he talks back, the passive aggressiveness, it's just captured so well. So yeah, unsurpassable, in my personal opinion. What else did I do? Oh yeah, on Saturday I was thankfully better, and I did another event with my friend Alys Fowler, who's written this book called Peatlands. And as the name suggests, it's about peatlands, bogs, moorland, whatever you want to call it. And Alys moved a few years ago to Wales, near Aberystwyth, and there is a bog there in Borth called Cors Fochnor, and Alys has been interested in peatland for a long time because she's been an advocate for using peat-free compost forever. I mean, I've never not known her not wanting people to use peat. Peat is not a good idea. If you're a gardener, please use peat-free compost. Yeah. And so the progression of her writing books about gardening and things like, about how to eat what you grow and herbs and houseplants and all sorts of things that she's written about. For some people, it may not be logical that you end up as a horticulturalist in peatland because bogs are always considered these kind of useless spaces. But she, it was fascinating to watch her become utterly obsessed with the topic. And, experience her writing this book as well. And so I did an event last year here in my neighborhood, in my library, where I interviewed her about a book live in front of people. I had a great time. I love doing it. I could do more, quite honestly. It's just it's good fun. I was told that not a lot of people want to do that kind of thing. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to do that? Talk to someone on stage about a book? Who are you? Why do you not want to do that? I loved it. And on Saturday, we did it in King's Heath. A friend of mine who lives in King's Heath, also German, she organised it there. She's also a friend of Alys's, and so I interviewed her again, and it was great. I had great fun. So this book talks about what is peatland, the history, the connection between humans and wet places, but also her kind of exploration of different peat areas in the United Kingdom, but also she goes to Ireland, and restoration issues and things like that. It's also, what was really interesting is how fast capitalism moves sometimes. So this book came out last year, and she talks about a lot of the threats that peatlands have faced, are facing, and will face. But one thing that I think no one could have predicted is that now, because of AI, huge data centers want to put the data centers into the bog, because obviously it's a cool place. And one of the huge issues is why it uses so much water is having to keep everything cool. So yeah, once you interfere with the bog, the bog's gone. Yeah, it's just a huge issue. So, but yeah, this has been really great. I love her writing, and I know I'm biased because she's a friend, but I'm also not biased because I recognize when someone is a great writer. And what is also great about this book is that it really kind of is an homage to becoming utterly fascinated with the topic and just being absorbed and consumed by it. That is sort of the underlying thing as well, and I really like that too. So yeah, so that was a nice event. Want to do more. it's like, I'm almost feeling like, it's like, excuse me, do you have someone for me to interview somewhere? I'm happy to do it. I'm a fast reader. I can do it, And it was nice because I will be totally honest with you. It is nice when people afterwards come up to you and tell you, oh, that was great. And it made me realize, because obviously I work from home, and I, what I do is inherently people will only let you know if there's problems. No one comes, it's very rare that someone comes back and tells you, oh, that was a brilliant translation. It is really rare. And so to do something where you're in a room and you have that immediate feedback from people, but then also the feedback afterwards, it just makes you feel good. And the world is awful at the moment, and the overwhelm from the news cycle is real. And so to be somewhere and have this kind of like intense conversation about a very overwhelming topic, but also filled with hope and possibility. And then people saying, it's like, that was great. I enjoyed that. That is nice. I won't lie, and I needed that. I really did. January is, those of you who've been watching my videos for a long time, my relationship with January. It is great, to have that. So after a rude interruption by the doorbell at like 7:45, excuse me, I'm back with some books that I read recently. And I chose them because they are sort of like a good example of how I read at the moment. Mostly nonfiction with some mysteries. I don't read much else. There are exceptions, but it's mostly like that. It's a clear pattern, and I obviously still do the thing, which is now a thing on TikTok. People making curriculums. I still do the thing where I read quite often thematically nonfiction on subjects, and I will touch on that as well. So one of the first ones that I read is Mother Mary by Arundhati Roy. Huge fan, as you may know if you've watched my channel before. I found God of Small Things like incredible when I first read it. Started reading her essays in the early noughties. Subscribed to a Yahoo group that would send out links and like blogs where like her essays were reproduced and things like that. So been reading that. Absolutely adore her. Have learned a lot from her about viewing topics that like are social justice related and environmental related. She's been an anti-fascist fighter for a long time, and it's been interesting reading this memoir of her beginnings, because I realized how much there was that I didn't know about her, and but also how her life has fed into her fiction, both The God of Small Things and The Ministry of Utmost Unhappiness, and so it's been really interesting, but also how much I related to a lot of things. Her mother and my grandmother could really, like, are they the same person? So yeah, it was really quite fascinating reading that and recognizing, that kind of, thing that I must have seen it in her book when I first read it, something that went really deeper, that I recognized something on a deeper level for myself through that. So I really loved it. And I loved hearing her thoughts. They kind of, what I quite often find is missing in someone's memoir is an introspection of the things where you made mistakes. Yeah. And she, in my opinion, does that. She looks at things and says like, well, you know, I know I couldn't do any different at the time. That was just how it was, and that's what I did. But, you know, it wasn't great, and I hurt people, and people hurt me, and I hurt them back. And I really like that. I think that honesty is refreshing. I felt deeply sorry reading how much maligned she is in India. And I've known that because like very stupidly, like not stupidly, but ignorantly, you know, naively. Many years ago, I said to a friend who is, you know, from like her family's from India, and I said it's just like, oh, you know, I really love, you know, a lot of Indian authors, and you know, I love, for example, Arundhati Roy, and she was like, oh, I know, she's like, she's a traitor, and I was really shocked by that kind of reaction, and reading now the memoir, I realized why you know a lot of Indian people feel that way. Do I think they're wrong? Yeah, I do. But you know, that happens to people who cry wolf, not wolf. No, that's the wrong, Melanie, that's the wrong metaphor. Not people who don't cry wolf, but actually are Cassandra. You know, they tell the truth about what's coming, but no one believes them. Yeah. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one so much that I read it twice. You know, finished it, started again. I also reread a nonfiction book, which is something I tend to do quite a lot more with nonfiction than I ever do with fiction. And I read again Who Owns England by Guy Shrubsole, because I want to read this year more on land justice, but not just from an English perspective, but from a general perspective of land justice, because obviously capitalism is eroding our access to land more and more, and wants to pit us against land and nature more and more. And obviously there's new threats all the time. Deforestation, you know, is obviously one that we've all grew up with. But now, as I mentioned just earlier, is like we have people wanting to put data centers into peatland, and, you know, like, and water use, and all sorts of things, you know. It's just like the mind just, you know, explodes on a daily basis. And so I thought I reread this one because I think one of the things that he did really quite well, and that a lot of people found very repetitive. I read some reviews where people said, oh, he's so repetitive. But the thing is, you know, he's repetitive because the same patterns happen on all levels. You know, it's just like, it is repetitive because it is repetitive. And so, but what I think he did really well is talking about how, you know, yes, it's all about money, but it is also almost as much about people getting an incredible kick out of gaming the system. And you know, and it becomes almost sport. And I find he really extrapolates a lot of information around the subject of who owns the land and how can we get access to the land. And because, you know, like as activists, you often you know, you start out, you think it's unfair and you want everyone to play fair. They are not playing fair, but they're gaming the system. And you as an activist don't have that access to the system because the system wasn't built for you to object. So by you objecting against the system, you are then accused of playing unfairly. And I think he sort of writes about this kind of mind-blowing, unfair conundrum in such an engaging way, where I often felt really helpless reading that book because where's the solution? But also incredibly empowered because, like, the fact that there's other people out there actively writing and doing things and seeing the same stuff, it just makes you feel less alone, right? So I really appreciate it for that. So yeah, so I want to read more around land justice. There's a couple of books coming out this year that I'm very excited about. There's also a Greenpeace reading list on the subject where I want to read a few books from. And yeah, so that's just my thing. But then on the flip side, I obviously still read a lot of mysteries. And one series that I've sort of discovered in January is a Sherlock Holmes based mystery series by a lady called Bonnie MacBird. And I like her shtick that she uses. She writes the intro as herself, saying, I've discovered this accidentally in an archive, this unpublished story by Watson about Holmes. And yeah, I really enjoy them. They're very light, you know, they're very cozy. My main issue is that I think Watson may be a little bit too stupid in it. But, you know, it's still entertaining. And I listen to them mostly. So mysteries are things that I mostly listen to these days because I read the nonfiction as book form and I need audiobooks in my life. So yeah, I read those as, you know, as audiobooks, mysteries, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, that's me. I don't know how long this is. Is this really long? It probably is. I shall have to edit this a little bit, I think, because we obviously have an interruption by the doorbell. But still not over it. 7:45. Yeah, and then I shall upload it. So thank you for watching, and thank you for welcoming me back. I really appreciate it. Bye.